Welcome back to the special bulletin review, Pathway to FADGI Compliance, sponsored by Kodak Alaris on Federal News Network. My guest today is Matt Doolittle, the Global Portfolio Manager for Document Scanners at Kodak Alaris. Matt, welcome back. And I think we've gone into so much detail here about the finer points of FADGI for any one given document, but I think the extra element to all of this is just the scale that we're talking about here, especially with agencies complying with M1921. We're talking about a really serious volume of records. And so to add that dimension to the conversation, what are some of the challenges of digitizing a large volume of records?
Yeah, Jory. So that's very true. There has been other efforts to try to start this digitization process with agencies and in other parts of government at a high quality, but they've never really scaled them at the size of what we're talking about with the M1921 mandate, right? So whereas we might have been producing hundreds of images a day for some other projects from very culturally significant documents, now when we're starting to look at normal business documents, we're in the thousands or tens of thousand documents a day that need to be digitized, meeting these high quality FADGI standards. So it's an order of magnitude larger challenge when you're talking about doing that much of volume meeting these standards. So the first thing is to get a high speed device that can meet these standards. A lot of the previously available equipment were either planetary type scanners where you're scanning one document on a page table with a camera above, or a flatbed where you were placing one document on a platen and scanning an individual document. Those systems don't scale when we're talking tens of thousands of documents. So you really need to put out an RFQ if you're needing to do this for a high speed they call them ADF, auto document feeder device. So be sure that when you're looking to do that, you get in your RFQs that the volume of documents you want to scan, the duration of scanning that you can do without having to do either recalibration or cleaning, and be sure that when you're looking at different vendors, you actually get those equipment on site and be sure that it works for the types of things that you need. And then you're going to have to train your operators. You're going to have to learn how to use a dice target, right? One of these targets that you use to measure the quality of the scanning device. You're going to have to create standards of how those checks go into your workflow every day. You're going to have to look at your whole scanning solution and be sure that it can handle the scale of volume that you're looking at. And these FADGI compliant images aren't like the JPEG images you might have been scanning for the last decade. These are very high resolution, usually uncompressed, 300 or 400 DPI images. So for example, a 300 DPI uncompressed, just single side of a page is about 20 megabytes of data. And if you're going to require 400, it's about 40 megabytes of data. That's orders of magnitude larger than what you would have gotten with either a perfect page compressed color image before, or an image coming off some other scanner. So it's important to be sure that you've got the storage you need, you've got the bandwidth in your network, and that the workflow that you're sending it through can handle those size of images, because we've never had this size of image and volume of data going through those back-end systems we had before. Do the planning up ahead, and then be sure that you test it to be sure that it works when you actually go live.
Okay, sure. Yeah. And beyond just the technical, need for this equipment, need for these services, obviously, I think this comes down to a certain level of the workforce at these agencies. One, just making sure they have the number of full-time equivalents to get this done, but also making sure that they have the skills necessary to appreciate all these things that you've outlined and be able to put them into motion here. So with those two elements in mind here, what do agencies need from their workforces to manage records digitization?
Yeah, from looking at it from a people perspective, a FADGI scanning operation as opposed to a traditional business imaging operation wouldn't need more people, but what it will need is people with the right kind of document managing experience to know what the requirements are and to be sure that the processes are in place. So you need a real document managing professional. And you need to work with your archivists. And if you don't have one, then get one, because those are the level of people that you need to understand how to successfully implement these guidelines. And document management professionals will help you be sure that you're getting the standard applied correctly. So not all images need to be FADGI 3 compliant. There are still plenty of types of work that you can scan in a more traditional imaging workflow. And if you do that work up front, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and expense and hassle later on when you know that you're applying the standard as it's intended to be applied, and not just saying, okay, from this point on, everything has to be FADGI, because it's not required, and it's going to become a huge burden on your organization that just isn't needed. So I guess in summary, it's not adding people, it's be sure you have the right level of training and experience, and that you have document imaging professionals looking at this process and make sure you're implementing it correctly.
Okay, great. And just recognizing again, agencies are facing some pretty tight deadlines with M1921, and that all of the services you've outlined here, I imagine a lot of agencies want to know how they can go about purchasing the kinds of equipment and services they'll need to be FADGI compliant. So how can they do that? And what kind of contract vehicles are available in government to make sure they can get those services and those devices?
Sure, absolutely. So there are very well-defined methods for product acquisition when you're talking about federal and state and local government, and you're still going to use those same vendors and same processes you did before. The important part here is that you get your RFQs and RFPs accurately defined of what you need, and that you include a few things. You want to be sure that the definition of the equipment you need is proper and correct for your business needs. You're going to want to ensure that it has a stipulation, if you can, for doing on-site trials, to be sure that you're not just taking your vendor's word, and I'm a vendor, so I understand this, that you're actually testing this on site and being sure that it can do what it says it can do. You want to be sure that the scanners come with pre-certified. You're not required to purchase additional professional services that are beyond what you expected to in order to keep the equipment up and running, and then keeping your processes going, and that there's some service support or enablement to ensure that that equipment stays in compliance, not just for the first week or the first month, but for months and for years that you're going to be using this equipment. So we're working as an industry to provide you with that equipment. So get your RFPs out there, defined correctly. Let us bring our equipment in and prove that it does what we say it can do, and then you'll have a successful rollout.
Okay, great. Well, you mentioned earlier in the conversation how new FADGI standards are in the works here, and we're going to see those hopefully pretty soon here. But in terms of other emerging trends in this space, what else should agencies be aware of when it comes to records digitization, and how should they prepare for those changes?
Yeah, so it's very interesting how this M1921 is affecting all of the document management industry here in the US. So what it's really doing is it's forcing all of the agencies to come up to a certain level of standard. So it's surprising when you talk to people, you find that many people are on different parts of the spectrum of document imaging. You'll have very mature, well-controlled agencies that have professional archivists and document managers and know their processes and are using modern technology. And you'll find also, if you talk to enough people, there are some people that are not quite there. In fact, I know that there are still some agencies that are using very antiquated technology, right? Even microfilming documents as a form of archival and preservation. So what the M1921 and FADGI standards are going to do, it's going to bring everyone up to a certain level of coherence with these guidelines, and be sure that we are not having some people on very different spectrums of document imaging. So it's forcing a leveling up of the whole set of agencies within the U.S. and state and local governments, and it's going to lead to a reduction in a lot of the costs that were associated with old paper document storage, right? So a lot of those warehouses are going to go away. A lot of the costs associated with handling physical documents are going to go away. So hopefully it should be a reduction in the cost as we move forward, and an overall increase in the access to information that was stored on those previous documents before in a way that can be searchable and available for everyone, not only the government, but as us as citizens.
Okay, great. Well, Matt, we have covered a lot of ground here today, but in closing things up here, what are some of the key takeaways that our audience should understand from this conversation?
Absolutely. So key takeaways: M1921 is requiring a shift to a forced digitization of document management within the government and all the state and local entities. You need to prepare for that. You need professional help to do that if you don't have it already. You need to plan. You need to get equipment that will work for your needs. And please test that equipment, get it on site. Be sure that you have equipment that will scan not only your FADGI workload, but also your traditional workload, because not everything is going to be needed to be scanned as FADGI compliant. So devices like the Kodak 5850 scanner bundle, you can either set it to scan in FADGI mode or easily switch it back to traditional scanning without requiring extra equipment. And then make sure your processes are put in place to ensure that that equipment stays in compliance. You're going to need a DICE test target. You're going to need some software to check whether those images are in FADGI compliant. You'll probably get something called Golden Thread that's available to do that testing. And then work your process and be sure that you are doing your tests every day, and that your document management workflow is running smoothly.
Okay, great. Well, a lot to process there, Matt, but thank you for all of those comments and all those thoughts on a really important topic for a lot of agencies. My guest today is Matt Doolittle, the Global Portfolio Manager for Document Scanners at Kodak Alaris. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, on the special Bulletin Review Pathway to FADGI Compliance, sponsored by Kodak Alaris on Federal News Network.